Keith Tebow from FRC Media. Thank you for joining us today. As we head to the November 3rd election, there are two statewide ballot questions that Fall River voters will be facing when they head to the polls on November 3rd. Question one deals with an item that's being entitled Right to Repair, and that has to do with auto repair. Back in 2012, voters passed an initiative petition which allowed independent repair contractors access to information from car dealers in order to repair vehicles. There's been a change or an amendment to that, and that's what's before voters coming up on November 3rd. This change is looking to access what's called telematics, which is some diagnostic information that's primarily being sent wirelessly from new cars to manufacturers. And local repair shops say they want access to this information. That's what's on the ballot coming up on November 3rd, being able to access this information, beginning with the new cars that are issued coming up in the model year 2022. So right now we're going to talk to Conor Yunits. He is from the Coalition for Safe and Secure Data, which is asking people to vote no on question one. Conor, thank you for joining me. How are you?
I'm doing great, Keith. Thanks for having us on.
I hope I framed that as accurately as possible. I know there's a lot of nuances
That was
to
pretty
this.
good.
Well, let me just ask you right off the bat, and we'll get into some individual questions and more specifics. Why should people vote no on question one?
Absolutely. So people should vote no on question one because question one is not actually about right to repair. Right to repair, as you just mentioned, is settled law in Massachusetts. It's been on the books now, technically since 2013, because there was actually a law before the ballot question even passed in 2012. The legislature had already passed a law, and then they had to reconcile what the voters passed with what they had already passed, and that became law in 2013. So it's been law now for 7 years. It works very well. I think the local repair shops would tell you that it works very well, and it protects and ensures that consumers in Massachusetts can get their vehicles fixed wherever they want, whatever repair shop they want. It ensures that local repair shops, dealer repair shops, do-it-yourselfers with the appropriate tools can access any information needed to diagnose and repair a vehicle. It even covers this telematics issue. It very specifically says if there's any information needed for the diagnosis and repair of a vehicle, and it's transmitted primarily telematically, and it's available to dealer repair shops, then it must be made available to independent repair shops. So it's that issue is covered in that law. What question one would do is go much beyond, much further than actual right to repair. Question one would enable any third party that gets access to your vehicle to access it whenever they want, from wherever they want. It wouldn't be just when your car is in the shop. It could be somebody sitting at home on a laptop accessing your vehicle, including your real-time GPS location data. So this question is really all about information. It would distort what right to repair actually is, and really a no vote is a vote to protect right to repair because it would keep the law as it is without raising any of the number of security risks that I'm sure you and I are about to talk about.
Yeah, well, we will get into that. Now, in terms of the telematics information, and that's, in newer cars, there's the ability for the car to actually communicate, right, wirelessly through 4G, even before that 3G and probably 5G going forward. Information from the car back to where? Is that going to the manufacturer? Where is that information going? And I guess what information is being used now? What's that data for?
Yeah, well, I think the easiest way to just explain the concept, right, that everyone's familiar with is something like OnStar, right? Well, that's been around for a long time. That is a telematics system that is transmitting information away from your vehicle to a third party and back to your vehicle. Auto manufacturers that have built in these telematics systems in the last few years primarily use that data to improve the vehicle, to improve the safety of the vehicle, to test how the car performs in bad weather, to see how the brakes work. It's actually very little of the information that a car generates is actually transmitted off a vehicle. As you can imagine, now these cars are extremely complex and high tech, and most of the information stays on the vehicle simply because the bandwidth of these networks is nowhere near strong enough to carry all this information off. So it's actually a very small portion of information that comes off. As I said, that's generally used for safety and to improve the driver experience. Also, mostly anonymized. What this would do is it purports, and it's a little bit unclear, but the ballot language would require the creation of a standardized interoperable system that would exist somewhere in the cloud that would be accessible by an app, would have to be accessible by excuse me, you have to work with every single vehicle in Massachusetts, and as you said, by model year 2022, which, as most people probably know, that those vehicles will start coming out right in 2021. So it's not exactly a big turnaround time for an extremely complex system. And the ballot question further doesn't provide any sorts of language around who or how that system would be secured. It has no wording around cybersecurity, no wording around personal safety or personal privacy. It says that manufacturers can have nothing to do with this system. So it's extremely unclear as to who would create it, who would maintain it, and who would secure this system that could access every single vehicle in the Commonwealth.
Now, in terms of the actual repairing of the vehicles, you're saying that as of right now, regardless of telematics, whether things are transmitted remotely or wirelessly or what have you, uh, all the independent repair shops will get all the information they need to repair a vehicle. And that you said that's part of the 2013 law. So that's not going to change. So I guess a question that I have for you moving forward is um, the data that is being received by manufacturers. You say it's anonymized. It's not, you're not going to know that Keith's vehicle is sending this specific information. It's just whatever vehicle I need to own. So I guess how important is it for the manufacturers to get that information and not car repair companies, I guess?
Well, as I said, car manufacturers are in the business of making cars or in the business of making better cars, and that's generally how they use this information. Right now, obviously, if you have a certain make of car, a certain car company you're loyal to, any information your car does generate is stored and protected by that company. But automakers have spent billions of dollars creating secure systems to try and ensure that and protect their customers at all costs. All of that work would be thrown out if this passes, because as I said, this would create this new system that nobody's built, nobody's tested, that there's no rules or requirements or understanding of how it would be secured or protected. And so when you think about it, let's say, and this gets to something I want to talk about in a second, but let's say there was a hacker out there, and not just, let's say even like a foreign hacker. We've seen stuff that's happened with Russia and other places. They wouldn't just have to hack. They wouldn't have to hack every individual auto company to take control of these vehicles. They would only have to hack one system. And the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration wrote a letter to the legislature last month, essentially saying that Question 1 creates an enormous risk of cybersecurity. It creates an enormous risk of an outside entity, a malicious actor, nation state taking control, not just accessing information like geolocation, but actually taking control of vehicles if Question 1 passes, because it creates real-time two-way access to vehicles. And you wouldn't need to control many vehicles at all to cause untold damage. You think about it, because this law would also apply to heavy-duty vehicles. So if 18-wheelers and other enormous heavy-duty, more than 40,000-pound vehicles will be connected to this, somebody can take control of one of those and cause massive amounts of damage. And that's something the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration takes very seriously and expressed their concern to legislators.
If you go to the website for the Coalition for Safe and Secure Data, one of the things you'll hear sort of, I guess it's a radio ad that plays, and it talks about the issue of privacy and hackers. I look at that as a little bit of fear mongering. Is that part of this argument that you're making? That it's in more than just the information. It's the you're taking the leap that it's your privacy is at risk and has nothing to do with the cars or the repair. It's privacy.
It's a huge concern. So just for a little bit of background, this a similar proposal was first put forward by these national groups that are funding this effort in California about 6 years ago. And that was defeated in the legislature in California, primarily because it was opposed by domestic violence prevention advocates. It was opposed by the NAACP. It was opposed by cybersecurity experts because it creates enormous risks. So, for example, And even here in Massachusetts, there was a hearing on similar legislation last February, and Jane Doe, which is the Massachusetts Coalition Against Domestic Violence, testified that the geolocation data that would be available under this presents extreme risk and creates an enormous risk of an abusive partner using that information to harm another person. That's a similar fear that was expressed in California. So that's not us saying this. These are domestic violence prevention advocates that are raising these risks. On the privacy side of things, as I just mentioned, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration has weighed in on the enormous risk of being hacked and what that could mean. And then just when you think about it, look, there's hacks. I literally got a notice from Google today that some of my passwords may have been exposed in a data breach, right? So these happen all the time, and I think we've gotten somewhat desensitized to it. But if we've learned anything from all these data breaches, is that the fewer organizations, the fewer companies, the fewer parties that have access to your information, the better. This proposal would explode the amount of third parties or other entities that have access to vehicle information across Massachusetts.
And your contention, we spoke a little bit about this before we came on the air, is that it's not necessarily guided by the repair shops, but by the suppliers who supply the repair shops with the parts, and that they're interested in that information as well.
Yeah, I would direct anyone watching to visit the Office of Campaign and Political Finance, which is the organization in Massachusetts that governs campaign finance. You'll see, for example, that the Coalition for Safe and Secure Data is funded by automakers. That's not a surprise. We've never tried to hide that. But what you'll struggle to see is who's actually funding the Right to Repair Coalition, which is pushing Question 1. You'll see that they've received 99.9% of their funds from two national groups, ACA and a group called CARE. What you won't see, what you'll only see if you watch their television advertisement, is that their top 5 donors include $35 billion O'Reilly Automotive and $27 billion AutoZone, which are really the companies driving this effort. The AutoZone VP of Government Relations is also the head of CARE, which is the group that's contributed all these millions of dollars to the Question 1 effort. So these are national companies. These are Wall Street-backed VC firms, publicly traded, billion-dollar companies that are driving and completely funding this effort in Massachusetts. It's not really about local repair shops, and that is the cover that they're hiding behind.
Let me get back to the information that comes from the cars. You mentioned earlier that the information is anonymized, going to the manufacturers, that most of the information stays right with the car. You're saying that would not necessarily be the case under this Right to Repair initiative? Because you mentioned domestic violence issues. Well, if they don't know that it's Keith's car, how are they going to know whether that person could be stalking, a former lover and the like?
Exactly. The information would not be anonymized, because it would be you'd be signing over. Customers would sign over their consent to repair shops or other third parties, not even necessarily repair shops. You could go into a Jiffy Lube, get an oil change, and check a box, and they have access to your data, and they would have information specific to your vehicle. They'd be able to get into that vehicle, again, even when you're not in the shop. It's not like right now you have to plug in. You have a little ODP port. You plug that into your car. They can get every bit of information they need to diagnose and repair the vehicle. You would not need to plug in for this to pass. You would, and I want to preempt, I'm sure, what they'll say, and they'll say, oh, it's only mechanical data. Well, 2 points on that. Number one, they wrote the language in this proposal extremely broadly. So it says that any information, quote unquote, related to repair. That is an unbelievably broad definition that essentially could mean, if your windshield wiper is sticking, that might be why your taillights are out. I mean, you could make a case for basically anything when you say related to. Secondly, they'll claim that they don't want GPS data, but ACA and CARE, the two groups that are funding this effort, were going around trade shows last year all over the country showing what they want their app to look like, and it included a map, it included location data. This is absolutely something they're interested in and will absolutely be part of this if Question 1 passes.
So, looking ahead, you mentioned the California initiative, which was in the legislature. Have there been any other similar ballot initiatives of this nature anywhere else across the country, and have they succeeded? No. Or is this the first?
Not to my knowledge. I believe this is the first, and it's worth noting too that this, generally speaking, there is a legislative process that works for this kind of stuff. Before, as I mentioned, before the ballot question passed in 2012, there was a compromise piece of legislation that was hashed out in the legislature and agreed to and signed before it had been the product of years and years before the ballot question was even voted on. This year, this group is just trying to do an end run around the legislature. They did file legislation this year for the first time. It had a hearing. It so far has not advanced, but they didn't even wait for that. They filed their petition for a ballot question before the legislature even heard the bill. So they're clearly not interested in getting feedback and any sort of compromise. They want the information. They're running under this cover of right to repair and local repair shops, and they're trying to sneak it past voters. And our job as a coalition is to look out for the interests of Massachusetts drivers and ensure they have all the information about question 1 and vote no in November.
One final question on back to privacy again. I keep going back and forth. I apologize for that.
Okay.
But since the information now currently can go to manufacturers, and you said they're not taking a lot of the information because of bandwidth issues, could they get that information? Could they weaponize that information themselves? Is that a privacy risk potentially?
How do you mean? I'm sorry, I didn't follow that.
You had just mentioned that with this law, people will be able to get this information that is not necessarily anonymized. Right now, the information just goes to manufacturers. Can they also gain that information from the car and find out that, yes, Keith Tebow went 85 miles an hour, last Wednesday, and use that and potentially be hacked to get that information?
Yeah, I mean, as I said, that's why automakers have spent billions of dollars securing their systems and ensuring that these are robust and as safe as possible. That is what they've been focused on. It's in their interest of consumer protection and protecting their customers. The automakers also voluntarily 6 years ago nationally agreed to a code of privacy principles that is on register with the Federal Trade Commission and is enforceable with the Federal Trade Commission, that is intended to protect this very thing, protect the privacy of their customers, protect the privacy of people that buy new automobiles. So they have done a lot in the name of protecting consumer data and ensuring cybersecurity protections, all of which, as I said, would be thrown out the window if this passes.
All right. Final question for you, Conor. Where can people find out more information on voting no on question 2?
Our website
question 1, rather. Question 1.
Question 1. Our website is our organization is a coalition for safe and secure data. We're leading the no on 1 fight. And the website is safeandsecuredata.com or safeandsecuredata.org. I'm pretty sure I take you both to the same place. And anyone has questions, can shoot us a follow-up email, and you'll probably hear back from me with answers.
All right. Conor Yunits from the Coalition for Safe and Secure Data, asking people to vote no on question 1. Thank you for joining us. I appreciate your time.
Thanks so much, Keith. It was a pleasure.
All right. And I want to thank you for joining us today here at FRC Media. I'm Keith Tebow. Have a great day.